Hi everyone, and welcome to the Business Renewables Centre Australia's Buying Power webinar series. Today we have an excellent lineup of experts to share their views on the emerging themes of 24/7 renewables and additionality. First of all, I'll introduce our team. If you want to give us a quick wave, Alex Nasser, our project officer, the organiser extraordinaire. We have Chris Briggs and John Prendergast, who are our technical directors at Business Renewables Centre, and I'm Jackie McEwen, I'm Program Director at BRC-A. So today's session will be recorded. You might have just heard the announcement for the benefit of those who are unable to attend the session today, and it will form part of our industry knowledge bank, which is located on our website under training and events. If you go right down to the bottom of the page, you can see all of our past webinars. We will have time for questions at the end. We encourage questions. And just feel free to pop any questions that you've got as they come up into the chat, and we'll try and address a few of those as we go. And otherwise, we'll get to those at the end. Before we get going today, though, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. For us here in Sydney, this is the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and some of you may have attended some NAIDOC Week events this week, which I'm sure went really fantastic. So just a really quick summary before we get going on what's happening at the BRC-A. We're doing lots and lots of work at the moment. We have our developer boot camp. We haven't had one for a little while, coming up very shortly on the 19th of July on day 2 at the Clean Energy Council's Australian Clean Energy Summit. So this is a lunchtime session. So just if you are coming to that event, please just grab some lunch and meet us and join the session. We'll be announcing our speakers soon. It's a great opportunity to gain some insights from large energy users on what they're looking for in a partner when you are looking to contract. And to register for that event, you just simply register for the summit and it's free to join our session. Next, we've got our sessions with the Central West Orana Renewable Energy Zone that we're delivering for the New South Wales Government. At the moment, we are providing PPA training and support and engagement in that res. And we've just delivered a session in Dubbo last week, which was great, alongside the Renewables in Agriculture conference. And our next event will be on the 21st of July, an online event. So if you are doing work in that region or have operations or supply chains with operations in that region, please jump onto our website and register for that event. If you are a buyer, it is, of course, buyer training. I'm going to hand over now to Alex to tell us about a couple of other events.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. So we'll also be shortly hosting, or commencing, I should say, PPA training for energy buyers in the Queensland Renewable Energy Zone. So we're starting with a session for councils in this July, followed by some workshops for businesses. So if you're in Queensland and you'd like to learn more, please keep an eye out on our socials and our newsletter and other invitations for registration details. We are also running a buyer bootcamp in August. So look, energy buyers, you can register your expression to attend that, and there'll be a link in the chat floating around during the webinar. So feel free to register for that, and we'll keep you updated with those details. Resources. So our Renewable Energy Masterclass series recently concluded. It's been fully delivered, and that was thanks to the support of the City of Sydney, City Switch and Sustainable Destination Partnership. We're going to be making all those useful resources available freely later on in the year. For now, though, you can watch all the recorded sessions, all 4 of them, on our YouTube channel. Again, a link will be posted throughout the webinar for you to make note of that. And one final thing, buyer members, a reminder to you all that training, policy, and promotional support are available to you as part of membership. And so, it'd be great for you to support BRC-A to enable us to continue demystifying PPAs through training and all those events that we're going to be hosting and resources that we are going to be launching. So yeah, I'll hand over to you, Jackie.
Fantastic. And just the next slide. So now on to today's topic. And today's topic is sort of a dual topic, really, both of which really reflect industry's desire to drive closer to that goal of true decarbonisation. Globally, 24/7 solutions and contracts are in their early stages of development. And this approach to matching supply and demand for renewable power attracts a range of views across the market, which will probably be evident from today's panel. Additionality, on the other hand, is not really a new concept, but it is one in which we encourage at the Business Renewables Centre, because supporting renewables that are additional to the grid means that you are going that extra mile to directly enabling grid decarbonisation. So these topics are some of the more advanced topics relating to renewable energy procurement for business. So if you are joining us for the first time today and the topic seems a little bit overwhelming, please don't despair. You can access our basics and intermediate PPA training via one of our mini sessions, some of which we just mentioned. But today, let's hear from our panel. Enough from us. Our panel is really here to help break down some of the mystery surrounding these topics. And so I'm going to introduce them now. So firstly, we have Anna Bruce. Anna is Associate Professor in the School of Photovoltaic and Renewable Energy Engineering and Joint Director of the Collaboration of Energy and Environmental Markets at University of New South Wales. Anna is leading several initiatives, research initiative projects, including the 24/7 True Zero research project funded by Race for 2030, which is exploring the role of 24/7 renewables matching. We also today have Steve Hoy. Feel free to wave when you're being introduced. Steve is founder and CEO of Enosi, and he leads a team developing retail energy 24/7 traceability and matching solutions using the latest fully scalable cloud technologies. Very interesting. Since 2018, Steve has led the growth of Enosi in the development of Power Tracer. We also have here today Jacob Mahoney of Flow Power. Jacob is General Manager of Energy Solutions at Flow Power. Jacob is responsible for overseeing the development of new business opportunities and leads his team in large energy contracting, renewable PPAs, and bespoke retail agreements. Hi, Jacob. We also have David Stavridis from X-ELIO. Hi, David. David is a commercial manager at X-ELIO, a global PV developer owned by Brookfield. X-ELIO has built over 2 gigawatts of PV plants in 14 countries, with pipeline of 1.6 gigawatt hours in development in Australia and the East Coast currently. In Australia, X-ELIO is focusing on the development of large-scale batteries, solar and hydrogen projects. Finally, joining our panel is Jonathan Prendergast, who I mentioned a little bit earlier, one of our technical directors. So thanks everybody for joining us. We've got a set of questions to get through and I'm going to direct them to specific people. And we've got quite a few to get through. So, but we also want this to be a little bit of a conversation. So if you do have any comments that you'd like to add, please do jump in. So my first question is to David, and I'm going to ask Steve his view as well. But what is, particularly for the benefit of our newly joining participants, what does 24/7 renewables mean, and what is it? What doesn't it mean? What isn't it?
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. So 24/7 renewables means having your entire load sourced from renewable sources, using a blend of renewable technologies such as wind, solar, and firming sources such as batteries. 24/7 renewables is a relatively new product in the Australian market, and I believe as more batteries come online, this will enable developers and retailers to provide a 24/7 product with more ease and less risk. But also to consider that the key to achieving 24/7 renewable energy is to conduct a cost-benefit analysis to determine the optimal blend of renewable sources needed to provide a firm 24/7 supply, as well as to understand the associated costs and how much of each technology, including oversizing, is necessary for the customer to achieve the desired position.
I'll wade in if you like about a couple of things about what it's not, because this is part of the question here. So the other point to make about this is it's not a quick fix. So while we're all looking forward very much to portfolios of assets being put together so that they can meet our demand around the clock, it's not something that's going to be easy to do on day one. There's a lot of times a day and so forth that hard to do. So the point is that what we're putting in place here with 24/7 carbon free is a higher standard, right? Well, we're saying, okay, you can have your kind of net zero standard, and you can still achieve a net zero standard while still adopting a 24/7 goal. And our view that turns on your market you're in, but in Australia, if you had a 24/7 score above 50%, that's a badge of honour. And so it's not necessarily to be at a 100% position. But beyond that journey towards that. And that's the point that 24/7 is trying to make, that we're trying to incentivize the required investments in resources that fill the gaps. And ultimately, that's what this is about. We know that the wind and solar will have gaps, that the resources to fill them are typically more expensive, but that's what we're aiming to do.
Thanks, Steve. And so some sound advice there, I think, David, on developing that CBA and really understanding what you're doing, and Steve really looking at that sort of that higher standard and reaching for that, I think is definitely of interest to a lot of the corporates that we speak to. So my next question is around additionality then. Again, what is additionality and what isn't it? I'm going to direct this to John Prendergast first. And just thinking about also, do corporates need to strive for additionality, and what are those options for achieving? And I'll go to Anna after Jonathan. Thanks.
Thanks, Jackie. Additionality has changed and adjusted over time. Originally, the main form of new renewables in Australia was wind projects in South Australia. So if you're a household or a business, the main way of procuring renewables at that time was through green power. And additionality was verified in a way where the renewable energy certificates created and bought were additional to the mandatory renewable energy targets at the time. And that made sure that your efforts weren't in vain if you're buying renewables, and they were additional. That was before we could actually do more stuff ourselves. So rooftop solar came along, people could install rooftop solar themselves. Then this model of corporate PPAs that BRC-A provides technical support on, where you can finance new renewables. And that's a real pure form of additionality, where you're making new renewable capacity happen. Obviously, just buying green power doesn't see a new wind farm or solar farm financed and constructed over time, and renewables can't really change their emissions reductions over time because their annual output is set by their design, their finance, their construction, and the wind or sun at the time. So that act of supporting the finance of new renewables is a very pure form of additionality. And we also have more stuff now. So even supporting electric vehicles, heat pumps, energy efficiency LEDs, all these can be forms of additionality. So that said, it doesn't have to be pure, less direct forms like buying certificates and retiring them, switching to green retailers, and these sorts of efforts are additionality, are less direct and pure than the finance of new renewables, but is also a justifiable form of additionality. And final comment would be that it's really has to be tailored to each individual business or person. For example, a small business that's a tenant can't really go and fund a solar farm or rooftop solar. So it's quite fair if they switch to green power, choose a green retailer, that sort of thing. And then for larger corporates that have energy and sustainability teams and can do derivative contracts, they've got that opportunity to do large scale corporate PPAs direct with wind and solar farms.
Thanks, Jonathan. And Anna, what are your thoughts around additionality and some of those options and what corporates should be doing?
So I guess, as John was saying, renewables, once it's built, it typically has all of its generation dispatched. Like being additional, it's really around whether or not consumption of that renewable energy and forces another buyer, like a retailer with a RET obligation, to sign up to a new project. But now, since we now have sufficient capacity installed to meet the renewable energy target, that that sort of environment has changed, but we still, because of the demand for from state governments and from voluntary markets, we're still seeing the RET prices quite firm. So, you know, by corporate buyers who are retiring those certificates are still, you know, potentially driving additional investment at this time. So, yeah, I guess a point that I wanted to add to what John was saying is that, yeah, I agree that, you know, the most certain way of ensuring additional investment in renewable energy is by, you know, driving new development in new plants. And that's why we're starting to see those requirements in some of the certification that's emerging around the world, including in the EU and the UK for their hydrogen standards, and also under discussion in the Greenhouse Gas Protocol Scope 2 consultations as well. But it is also, I guess, possible to, you know, achieve additional renewable energy generation by actually reducing the curtailment of renewable energy that we're now starting to see at certain times of the day. And that could include by load shifting or by the use of storage, you know, which could potentially free up congestion and transmission capacity and reduce the curtailment, and therefore lead to additional renewable energy being generated. But I also wanted to make the point that, I guess, you know, when we're thinking about this big picture, we're really wanting to achieve a whole transition to renewable energy. And in that, you know, the investment in dispatchable resources and that storage and that load flexibility is a really key part of that. So corporates that do want to, you know, invest in or participate in contracts that really drive that investment, you know, that's potentially useful and additional in a different way. Yeah, and I guess the final point I wanted to make is we're talking about renewable energy additionality, but, you know, also emissions actually vary over time. So it does matter, you know, when you're actually consuming electricity from the grid, even though we only, you know, we just typically use it average emissions intensity factors at this time. But yeah, it's possible to design a PPA or an operating strategy to actually minimise emissions temporarily as well.
Yeah, great, thanks, Anna. And I suppose that really leads, what you were just saying there really leads on to my next question, which is around corporate PPAs, which, you know, with new solar and wind farms has proven to be a scalable model that supported the finance of hundreds of projects globally. Is this something that we should be focusing on?
So yeah, I guess, you know, that, yeah, potentially, you know, there are concerns from some project developers that the 24/7 PPA, it is more complex and it does raise some potential risks in terms of just ensuring that matching is taking place, and that can, you know, potentially present barriers to customers signing up to those PPAs or to the bankability of those projects from the developer perspective. And I guess the other concern is that, you know, by sort of optimising operation of those assets at the portfolio level, rather than you know, letting AEMO do it at the system level, is potentially going to lead to less efficient outcomes. Yeah, and that's something that we're taking a look at in our research project. You know, how material is that concern? But you know, we just also have to recognise that you know, customers want to be part of the solution, and those that are wanting to really lead on sustainability, you know, might be looking for different types of PPAs for sustainability reasons, or you know, just in order to provide a hedge against their exposure in the spot market, etc. So, or, you know, minimize their emissions. So we are seeing some developers that are wanting to develop new types of PPAs that are more tailored to those customers' demands. For example, the recent baseload contract that Neoen has signed with BHP. Yeah, so probably should leave it there.
Yes, no, that's fine. Thanks very much. And just with regards to that research, what is the sort of timing and the likely way in which that might be shared with industry?
So we've got another year on that project. So we'll be releasing public reports with the key findings and and looking for opportunities to present the results at a different forum.
I dare say we'll be inviting you back for that. David, and X-ELIO, you would no doubt have a view on that sort of that, the desire to focus corporates on that scalable model of corporate PPA supporting projects. Do you have any sort of thoughts around, how we might do that? And
Yeah, absolutely, Jackie. So, for us, PPAs are crucial to getting more projects out of development and into operation. So yes, for us, focusing on signing more PPAs is definitely a positive, especially for everyone. Also, in our experience, it's pretty challenging to obtain debt to finance a project without a PPA in Australia. So it's important to note that banks have strict criteria when it comes to the PPA type, tenor, volume, and who the counterparty is. So making a project bankable is also important because that also lowers the cost of power from the project. So if a corporate customer is seeking a PPA, it's important to work with the developer as a team to ensure that all stakeholder requirements are met, to ensure a good outcome for all parties involved. And from what we've seen over the last few years is that the PPA space has definitely evolved, with more corporates being more understanding of what the requirements are to be part of a successful project. So, we're finding that we're having more discussions early on in negotiations in more detail, which helps eliminate any surprises later on. And we've found that also creates a better working relationship with these long-term deals.
Great, thanks, David. And obviously, we like to think we've been helping corporates to understand a little bit better and support that case as well. Absolutely. So looking, so probably back to Steve now, and wanting to understand a little bit around, the case for corporates getting involved in storage, firming, and reliability. Versus this really being left to the energy sector, i.e. the government and the regulators. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, I think clearly both should happen. I mean, we need but the government and regulators to set the frameworks, and then tweak the parameters and settings of that regulatory framework. But clearly corporates have driven a lot of the early stage solar and wind projects we've seen in Australia, and they can continue to lead. What concerns me at the moment, I'm starting to see it already, it's a nice problem to have in a way, but we have corporates who for years saying, well, hey, I'm net zero. The problem is, to get to that point, they're now saying, okay, I can take the foot off the gas here. But they haven't actually achieved true zero. They're still procuring fossil fuels off the grid, and they're buying certificates and so forth, which is great, and helping with additionality and all those things. But they are, paying money to take credit for other people, for energy other people have actually used. And we can't all get to zero if the leaders, simply taking credit for energy other people are using. So the corporates need to continue to lead. And so this is the opportunity to do that. And can the government help? Yeah, absolutely. But we do have an open electricity market, and it's market forces that drive the investment, and it's up to government to set the parameters in the right way, not necessarily force us into these things. And I know we'll come to it later in the webinar, but the government's initiative in Australia to create renewable energy guarantees of origin and to timestamp those is an enabling thing that enables those who wanted to go down on the journey towards 24/7, enable them to do it. In a way that they can trust and has that government stamp on it. So that's my view on that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's a corporate leadership space, isn't it? It's something where, it's leaders of industry who are looking at this and looking to go that extra sort of mile. Back to Anna again, any thoughts around, that case for corporates getting involved from the research that you've been doing?
I think I'd just add that there's a lot of opportunity.
You have somewhat answered it already in your last minute, but any other thoughts?
Yeah, just the opportunity on the demand side for that flexibility that really we need to tap into if we want to keep prices down. So yeah, I think that's
sure.
Contract can really incentivize that.
Certainly a goal, yes. Steve.
Yeah, there are times and places that we just don't need more, so another solar farm, right? So, and the fact that the price of a REC, or of LGC in Australia for a solar farm is exactly the same as the price for any other resource, is a thing that doesn't help in terms of incentivizing resources that that operate when the sun's set. And that's what we're aiming to do here.
Sure. So then thinking about what corporates should be doing, should a corporate shift demand where possible to times where its own renewable generators are generating, or where the overall grid has greater supply of renewables? And this question I'm going to ask of Jacob.
So yeah, I'll take that as you mean an offsite PPA and not a solar system sitting on your roof.
Yes, indeed.
I think if it's on your roof, there's no arguments there. Use that first.
Absolutely.
But yeah, if it is a PPA compared to just when the grid is greenest, honestly, with what most corporates are doing in Australia, doing either is going to be a big improvement to soaking up renewables. So at the moment, in a way, it's kind of splitting hairs. If you are asking from a optimizing, the most altruistic point of view, I guess, then, it's going to be around targeting the greenest periods of the day. That's going to have the biggest impact on carbon emissions. However, some corporates, and I think it's been mentioned earlier, they might have a PPA that's got a retail structure that benefits them for matching their consumption with their generator. And if they do have that sort of arrangement, I think, play on, that's going to be, you're still doing the right thing. And more often than not, if your solar system's generating, it's going to be a greener time in the grid anyway. And maybe just one more thing to add on that is that there are, I guess, products out there that will incentivize you to use more electricity when the grid is greener. That's whether you have a PPA or not. So if a PPA does seem too complex for some corporates, you could always look at those, which, you can save a bit of money and use a bit more green energy as well.
It was certainly encouraged the demand shifting, to maximise your situation with our corporates. Steve, what are your views?
I think the thing to do, if there's something that the corporate's interested, you've got to measure and manage first, right? You've got to kind of know what it actually is, and that can start with, okay, how green is the grid? As I'm procuring, I match my load profile against what the grid emissionality is at the time, and we're starting to see some of that information come through. Right at the moment we use kind of annual emissionality factors, but the information is becoming available from the market operator to get there with that. But yeah, as Jacob said, you can procure. You can have a procurement strategy here that actually amps that up, that improves that. And as I said earlier, there's a lot of corporate load that simply can't shift necessarily to the middle of the day or whatever it is, and so they want to be assured that they can be buying renewable power at that time. So they may need to be the one that's actually contracted with that storage resource or with that wind farm as well in a portfolio. It helps us avoid curtailments. If you do shift your demand to solar, that's typically the low cost times of day, so that's kind of going to lower your costs, depending on your contract structure, obviously, and it sends the right demand side signals. So we can't just focus on the on that grid emissionality for everyone. I mean, the grid's kind of got those renewables with or without you, and again, we need not to be kind of just taking credit for energy other people are using. Do it yourself.
Yeah, doing it yourself is certainly the sort of motivational concept here, isn't it? So realistically then, how big, Jacob, this one for you really, how big do you think the market will be for 24/7 renewables in Australia? And will it go beyond the big corporates?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. Honestly, I think for for true net zero, like 24/7. In the near term, it's going to be pretty small. I mean, I think Google have said that they want to be 24/7 by 2030. They're pretty well resourced as far as corporates go, and they're saying it's going to take them 7 years. So I think that just kind of demonstrates how big of a challenge it is. In saying that, Flow Power started selling some of the first PPAs in Australia in 2017, and you'd be pretty surprised by the name. So Alpine MDF, Anchor Manufacturing, Borough Foods, Ideal Wines, all big energy users and big businesses, but not necessarily household names. And these guys were signing corporate PPAs before any of the big corporates, like years before, the Asahi ones and the Westpac ones. So their motives weren't always sustainability first. Honestly, most of them were looking at an opportunity to lock their energy price for a long period of time. And they've benefited from that greatly, like through 5 or 6 years of a lot of uncertainty. So I guess to come back to answer your question, I guess what I'm saying is that we don't know who will take the lead on this, but in order for businesses to take a lead on it, there's got to be a market there, there's got to be products there that create a business case outside of just sustainability. Obviously, everyone wants to do that, but if it's really hard and there's no cost benefit, it's going to be really hard to get over the line. So I think, that's kind of the most important thing to get other businesses involved.
If I can just wait here for a second, the key is all businesses don't want to have a derivatives trading team on staff. The key to this is retail energy suppliers getting their act together and offering products that help to meet this demand for energy that's actually matched. And nearly everybody buys their energy from a retail supplier, and that's why it's going to go way beyond the major corporates, because the retailers will step into the gap. We're starting to see that in other markets, and say, I'll offer either, if not a 24/7 PPA, they'll match your supply, give you that information that you need, or even just simple things like a 2-part tariff. We're doing a project in Italy at the moment where and it's residential consumers, right? Residential consumers matching their energy to the solar farm output. When the sun's shining, it's cheaper. When it's not, it's more expensive. It's a very simple product. It's matched to the time of use, and the customers save money when they do it.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like a really interesting case study, Steve. And just on that, those couple of examples that Jacob mentioned before, I believe we've still got our a case studies document of some of those, particularly manufacturing organisations and how they achieve those. It's on our knowledge bank on our website. I think it's called something along the lines of demand matching and renewables. So sort of some early work that was done there. Back to you again, Jacob, then. Many corporate buyers find PPAs already quite complex, and we've sort of discussed that, and I think, Steve, you just really sort of made that point. Do you think, and I think Anna also hinted at this one, do you think many are likely to see 24/7 as too difficult? And what would you change for it to become more mainstream?
Yep. Very good question. So I think for most companies, it is going to be very difficult, and I think it'll be more of a goal than an absolute, we need to achieve this KPI. Steve kind of said before, if someone's at 50% renewable matched at the moment, they're doing an awesome job. So I think if we can have businesses going, currently my matching is 20% and we've got a goal to get it to 40%, I think that's going to get us there a lot quicker. You can think about it like trying to go vegan, right? Like we all know there's environmental impacts, environmental benefits by going vegan, but it's very difficult and not a lot of people, I guess, want to do it, or they find it really hard to do it. I don't think the response would be, well, I can't go vegan, I'm going to eat meat 3 times a day instead. Like I'm just going to completely give up. You might cut back, you might do meat only Mondays, you might do white meat only, something like that. So I think, to bring it back and answer your question, I think it's very important to give corporates that context that we're not going to get there with just a few corporates that have, a lot of resources and are able to get to 24/7. It's going to be lots of business making small changes to, I guess, soak up more of the available renewables in the grid.
And I think maybe, Jacob, as well, we see a lot of corporates with a stepped approach to their ultimate goal. So, maybe they don't cut out meat altogether this week, but then they, it starts to become a once a month experience. Also, for different sustainability and financial reasons. Probably the vegan argument goes a long way there too. Yeah, so David, do you have some thoughts on this topic as well?
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. I do. So I think for me, the challenge with contracting a 24/7 product will be managing multiple technologies at any given time, as each renewable source comes with a different set of risks. So there needs to be a balance between cost, sustainability, and obviously reliability. But I guess one of the positive things that we've seen the last few years is that the duration of executing a PPA is decreased as customers, lawyers, and developers have become more familiar with project and contract risks. And definitely the industry is evolving to accommodate more renewable products to be accessible through traditional energy procurement methods. So, you know, and flowing on from what Jacob said before, I think that as an industry, we all need to play a part in simplifying access to 24/7 renewables and a transformative approach to energy procurement, supply, and policy design will be critical to accelerating its arrival.
Yeah, so simplification is certainly the mecca when it comes to this sort of thing for corporates who obviously, as you say, you know, I think maybe Steve might have mentioned not everyone wants a derivatives trader on their team. Some organisations, though, there are real benefits to being able to play in that market, and that usually comes down to resources and size. Annie, you look like you had something you wanted to add there.
I just wanted to say that like we are starting to see now in the US these kinds of PPAs being offered, or 24/7 kind of products, and that's both in sort of market-based parts of the US, and also these are being offered by regulated utilities. But as was just being discussed, they're not 100% matching, but it's usually like a defined percent, 70% to 90%, and that includes you know, the type of contract that Google's signed up to in some of the US states as well. So yeah, and it's one step at a time.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think that's right. And look, that's where we've been with PPAs as well. You know, it really did start out with that sort of really only large wholesale PPAs at the beginning, and now we have a really wide range of products right across the you know, the developers, retailers, and all sorts of different options that are not PPAs at all. So you know, this is sort of the market that has evolved and will continue to evolve to address the corporate's needs as the clients. So a final question before we go to Q&A, and I'll go back to Jacob on this one. Again, what do you think will be the implications of time stamping on renewable energy certificates proposed by the federal government?
Yeah, I think it opens up a lot of interesting possibilities. I mean, we've been talking today about, you know, 24/7 energy being 30% matched, being 40% matched, being 50% matched. I think for one, it opens up a conversation about what good looks like. Like really, the corporates that are looking at this at the moment are just looking at it for themselves. Really, there's not a lot in the market about what is actually good. Is it 30, 40, 50, 60? So it opens up that conversation. It also allows businesses to certify that they are X% renewable, whether that's 50 or 100. So currently you could do it right now, but you couldn't get a green power type stamp like you can with being 100% matched with renewables, not on a time basis. So yeah, it allows businesses and corporates, I guess, to get some recognition for the good work that they may be doing or they may be about to start doing. It also opens up some other interesting possibilities, you know, with potentially instead of retailers having to buy 20% of their load in LGCs, which they currently have to do whenever they're produced, there could be, you know, a need to purchase that time match to 20%, which would greatly, I guess, improve the business case for firming and particularly batteries. But it all kind of depends on how that is finally drafted.
Yeah, right. And Steve, your thoughts on this sort of renewable energy certificate time stamping?
Yeah, just to clarify for everybody online, you know, what happened, the government has put out papers late last year for the design of a thing they're calling a renewable energy guarantee of origin. It came out at the same time as a thing called product guarantees of origin as well. A lot of the driver here was green hydrogen. because Australia needs to get its act together on what is green when it comes to green hydrogen. So there's a bit of context around I want to kind of just put there. And to the government's credit, what they've put into the idea around these REGOs or REGOs, whatever they call them, REGOs, is to give themselves that future flexibility to adjust the policy settings as required. So there's a bunch of things in there which are kind of optional at this stage, or to be phased in potentially after LGCs are retired in 2030, and timestamping is one of those elements. Similarly, additionality rules, also on the REGO idea, they're going to put on the certificate, the commissioning date of the plant, so that in the future, the governments can say, okay, well, plant needs to be less than 3 years old or 5 years old, or whatever the policy setting wants to be. So that's great that they're giving themselves that flexibility. And as Jacob points out, with timestamp REGOs, they could even go as far as the retail obligation, being to buy not just 20% matched across the entire profile. For example, let me go a further step and say, how about you have to buy a certain number, between 6 and 9 p.m. a bit of time stamped accordingly, and to set the policy settings quite sharp. So it can be done, and this of course lines up with international trends, right? So the EU under their Renewable Energy Directive number 3 is already going down the path of time stamping. It'll be mandatory by 2030, voluntary through 2027. So that's already happening. I think Anna mentioned the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, and WRI are writing this into the Scope 2 guidance for the next release of that, and green hydrogen standards themselves. It's not green in Europe, and it's already in the law, unless it is time matched, renewable, and on the same grid. And again, phasing in, and that's why the certificates need this flexibility, so that policy can have things like phasing in periods and so forth. So yeah, a bunch of things. So it's a really important step, but it's nothing not to be scared of. It's an opportunity, I think, for policy to get fine tuned on what we actually need, which is resources to fill the gaps.
Yeah, can I just also add to that, Steve? Yeah, so definitely around the world, there's actually a number of jurisdictions where their certification requirements do include time matching, and that includes in the EU RED 2 for green hydrogen, but also in the UK and the US. And there's an executive order that government agencies in the US have to buy 50% of their renewable energy hourly matched. So that's going to be a huge market. But yeah, the Scope 2, the greenhouse gas Scope 2 protocol is, there's a consultation sort of process underway. So yeah, we'll see how that falls out, but that would have big implications for corporates in Australia.
So I suppose for corporates really listening to this in Australia, being aware of what's happening in Europe and the US and globally more generally is important. Certainly not to let it hamper your efforts to go renewable and to procure, but keeping in mind and understanding what this is about and how it might apply to your business. And as David mentioned earlier, having a look at that perhaps in your cost benefit analysis, what some of those direct and indirect sort of options could be. So we've got a number of questions here. I can just see that my colleague, Chris Briggs, has managed to get his Zoom going. A number of people have had trouble with Zoom this week, including myself. So Chris, if you're able, we can jump across to some questions now. I don't know if you can see those there. Perhaps I'll get you started. The first question we have here is from Bernard around corporate action and what needs to change in the grid to ensure that renewables are used and distributed well. So this is something that probably corporates can't do a lot about, but I suppose it's certainly an interesting question. Does anyone have any views on that or would like to take that question?
Yeah,
Jonathan. Oh, yes. Yep, yeah, please do.
Yeah, I think, the grid definitely does have its challenges. And I think at its simplest form, I think the upgrading of transmission lines, which is pretty well, I guess, documented and spoken about pretty often in a lot of industry forums, needs to definitely happen. And I think, you know, the quicker acceleration of more batteries coming into the market will help take a lot of stress off that grid. So I think as that starts to definitely change and evolve over the next, I guess, over the short to medium term, I think there will be a little bit of an easier strain on the grid, or a little bit of less strain on the grid. But there definitely is a lot of work that needs to be done, and I think there definitely needs to be support from a government level as well, because the cost of upgrading those lines is pretty exy. So
I guess it's about getting across what you can and can't influence as a corporate, but certainly, you know, by participating in this market, you are able to influence and require that upgrade to the grid and the systems. So very important. Chris, back over to you to manage those Q&A.
Thanks, Jackie. Yes, I've been sort of reading your questions in the background here. I'll pick one out that follows on, I guess, the last panel discussion, which observes that there's going to be a transition from LGCs to REGOs, renewable energy guarantee.
Might have lost Chris there.
And whether there's going to be a premium for time stamping.
Chris, could you just repeat that question? You just dropped out for a second there.
Yeah, sorry, might be my home internet. Yeah, the question was whether the panel have any thoughts on how the pricing will change from LGCs to REGOs, obviously very early, but in particular, I guess, whether there'll be a premium for time stamping. Might be one that Steve and others might want to take on.
Yeah, I'll have a crack. The intent for time stamping REGOs and in other jurisdictions as well, you know, what known as granular certificates and so forth, you know, is that there will indeed be a premium. Not for time stamping, but for time stamping of those certificates that represent when renewables are scarce on the grid. And the opposite as well, that they'll be cheaper, you know, when there's plenty of sunshine, for instance, in Australia. So yeah, it'll be a differentiated price for the certificate itself, as opposed to just for the energy. And it's driven by the demand for renewables, not just demand for all energy across the grid. So it's a slightly different dynamic to the wholesale market.
To what extent do you think we might see price differentiation? I've seen people starting to raise scenarios that we might have a different price for every single interval, and that this is going to create a lot of complexity. I mean, the sort of trade-off, obviously, between the precision and the pricing versus the complexity that might come from differentiation. Are there any thoughts from the panel on that?
Well, I've got a view as well. You know, generally, look, my overall answer is, you know, we have these things called computers now. We can handle the complexity, and so, you know, it is achievable, and the market, you know, markets will kind of will match that as we go. We have some, you know, pretty complex markets already in operation, and just as a general thought, but yeah, it could be that the prices will vary, or the people start bundling, you know, products for, you know, in the same way as we've seen in electricity markets. You know, we'll have this other structure that might be a bit more seasonal or and, you know, time of day kind of oriented, you know, bundling up the 9 p.m. ones or whatever it is, right?
Does that create problems? I was going to ask you, Jacob, actually, you know, for communication with clients about, you know, obviously the, you know, that added level of complexity, understanding how that would be charged.
I think it won't be too bad. Like, as Steve was saying, we have computers, which is an excellent point, and we have them at retailers, which is good. So we'll be able to, essentially, most customers probably won't see too much of it. Like, if you think of a household, a retailer's going to keep doing what they're doing, and they're going to take a position on what they think they cost, and they're going to deal with the overs and unders. For a commercial customer, they might see a variable price, but lots of commercial C&I customers would be used to that. I mean, LGC prices are still, there's a spot price, and lots of retailers will pass that through. So businesses are used to seeing that move. You know, from a few years ago, they were $85 and they're at $40 now, and you know, they've been expected to go to $5. So these schemes already do move. They don't move on the, you know, 5 or 30-minute interval, like, you know, we're proposing. But yeah, businesses should be, I guess, quite used to seeing those changes, and other users, smaller users, are unlikely to actually see much change. And maybe just point out that there's benefit as well. I mean, it's just a further incentive for commercial industrial customers that do use a lot of energy. It just provides them with more incentive to potentially avoid those higher certificate prices, which will correlate with lower periods of renewable energy.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions which I guess go to whether this is going to be an enduring trend or not. So we have a question asking, isn't this just a temporary balancing act for supply and demand of renewables? And once we're over this hump and there's great supply, we won't be having this conversation. And then there's another question saying, do you think corporates will care as much about time matching if we achieve 82% by renewables by 2030? So any reflections, I guess, on panels on the enduring or the longevity of 24/7 and whether it might fade as we get a really saturated renewables grid?
I think it could even grow, couldn't it? Because as we see greater supply of wind and solar, we'll see more market benefits for using energy at the right time. And that's a lot of what this discussion about is today, that using energy in the middle of the day can be a lot greener than in the evening. And those market benefits will flow through as there's more renewables. And it will also become more pertinent that we can have a cheaper transition to renewables by shifting our demand that we can to when wind and solar is abundant and soaking it up as it's generated. Or we can be lazy and rely on the installation of gigawatts of storage just to take care of it all. And that will come at a greater cost. So all Australian corporates, households, industry have an interest in keeping these costs down. Wind and solar we need. Storage will how much we need will depend on how good we are as customers in soaking up that wind and solar. And the storage will probably be what determines that final price that we pay at home. And the key thing will be the business case for individual businesses and corporates. And if those market benefits flow through to them, they'll have lower energy costs for adopting 24/7 renewables.
Right. Another question, do the panel think it's efficient to match individual loads and projects versus leaving it to market that can extract the diversification benefits of multiple loads and projects? I think we touched on a little bit in the panel discussion earlier, but I'll put that one out.
Yeah. Kind of discussed this earlier with the question, and I think Brian speaks to that diversification benefit. So I think that has to be a foundational understanding that let's not throw away the concept of the grid. The grid connects us all up together, a bunch of imperfect generators and a bunch of very imperfect customers, and somehow makes it work at an affordable price most of the time. And we have to accept that that is a very efficient way of managing supply and demand, that portfolio of customers and generators, and it reduces the cost by having less of that sort of backup capacity. It's all shared across the grid. So everyone adopting their own generation portfolio would be more expensive rather than tapping into the diversification of the grid.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, there are a couple of studies that have been done, modelling studies, that for a couple of market regions in the US and also in Europe, and they do show increased costs for this kind of optimizing at the portfolio level or to meet C&I customer 24/7 contracts. But, you know, it's quite context specific, and it kind of depends on what flexible resources are available in that grid. And so, yeah, we're going to do a similar study here in Australia. But yeah, those studies don't show that the additional costs are huge. And yeah, of course, it's a model. It's a least cost optimization model. So the reality is always a bit different to that anyway.
Definitely an interesting exercise by the likes of Google. And Ryan shared an interesting article on LinkedIn recently, sort of comparing the additional costs with the base case being that more certificates and annual being 100% renewable across the year. And one opportunity they discussed it for corporates wanting to go that next level would be to focus on new wind and solar capacity in high emissions regions where it's coal dominated. And David, maybe that's what Salesforce's intentions were with your Bluegrass solar farm PPA in Queensland, that Queensland has 60-70% black coal, and Salesforce, I presume, doesn't use 200 gigawatt hours in Queensland, but signed a PPA with you guys to help finance that solar farm. Similar with Amazon, they signed PPAs with around 130 megawatts each, Suntop and Gunnedah solar farms. about 60% offtake of each, and managed to get those two financed by Canadian Solar. And that's really a fantastic additionality. It's in a grid where we're heavily reliant on black coal in New South Wales, and we have to urgently replace existing coal power stations. So there's another model for corporates going the next step beyond annual reconciliation of LGCs to 24/7, focusing on additionality and other opportunities.
Right. I think we're out of time for questions, so I'll pass back to Jackie. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much. There are a couple of other points and questions there in the grid, and also an important point there from Penny around manufacturers and other businesses that really can't change their demand patterns very easily due to the way their operations work. So obviously some different options need to be considered for the different type of business that you're in. So thanks very much, everybody. And I would particularly like to thank our excellent panel today for their answers. I think there are obviously some related topics we didn't really touch on here, particularly around hydrogen, etc. The Clean Energy Council is holding a breakfast on day one of ACES, which is going to be also on 24/7 renewables. So if you're really interested in this topic, certainly worth joining that. If you are interested in participating as a panelist in future BRC-A webinars, it's fun. Just ask the group here, and please get in touch. We have lots and lots of topics coming up over the next 12 months that we'd love you to participate in. I think people really appreciate the different viewpoints and the different sorts of options and solutions that are available to businesses now. So Alex, I don't think there's anything else we had to mention. No, all fantastic. Thanks everybody very much. Again, as we mentioned, it's a recorded session. So if you missed something and you want to go back, please have a look at our website. Alex will be sending around a little follow-up with that link to the recording. And thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you at the next one.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you.